Okay, this week's lecture, The American Revolution. Um, just a little review to start us off. The Puritans of the 1600s, I think you found out they clearly set up American Romantic thought. Their belief in the individual, the value of introspection, really pondering oneself and one's actions, and their fierce dedication to being virtuous as well as their optimism, because they saw themselves as chosen by God and having a divine purpose to create a new nation, a city on the hill, for a light to the whole world. Um, all influenced Americanism, that is, American thought and its literature. By the mid to late 1700s, such beliefs had become pretty entrenched in the new American, captured in Cravecoeur's What is an American that you read. Individuality, hard work, and freedom became the cornerstones of what eventually became to be known as the American dream. That you can get to these shores with absolutely nothing, and through hard work and perseverance and individual freedom, you can become anything you desire. A very idealistic dream. And freedom became the battle cry. Why? Well, for the previous 150 years now, there'd been a lot of fighting between the French and the British, which country would actually end up owning these lands. The French Indian Wars, also sometimes called the 7 Years' Wars, between 1756 and 1764, were called such because the Native American tribes sided with the French. So it was the French and Indians against the British. Ended with the British triumphing. And one of these, little side note, one of these colonists who fought on the British side and kind of took out the French was George Washington. Um, well, this war, 7 years of war, cost the British a lot, and King George III had to get some money in the coffers to support his monarchy, his kingdom, his royalty. That cost some pounds, some British pounds. What do you do? Well, his choice was to tax the colonists and to tax them heavily. Of course, this was not popular. Additionally, as the British Crown became more involved in the affairs of the colonists, the people began to worry that they would once again begin losing individual freedoms and become subjects of the monarchy they had just fled a generation ago. So, the combination of taxation without representation, the colonists were not allowed to have any representation in England in Parliament, burdensome payments with absolutely no freedom to speak up against such, proved fatal. The Sons of Liberty began to fight back. Of course, the Boston Tea Party was a response to heavy taxes on British tea, kind of a staple. And the results then, the British responded with what were known as the Intolerable Acts. More and more taxation, more and more regulations and restrictions. Sound familiar? The Boston Harbor was shut down. Virtually supplies then couldn't get into the colonists. The result was not what the British expected. They kind of expected that the colonists would fold and cooperate. Instead, the result was war, the revolution. Fighting broke out on April 19th, 1775, when, and I think this is worth kind of remembering too, when the British soldiers, the big kickoff was that the British soldiers were told to take away the colonists' guns. And that was actually the tipping point that resulted in war. What most united people in 13 very different and very separate colonies to leave their farms and actually risk everything and fight the British. who had much more weaponry, much more funding, um, much more experience fighting. Many historians believe that an article written by Thomas Paine, published January 10th, 1776, titled Common Sense, had more to do with the colonists committing to fight and winning than any other single factor. In Thomas Paine's words, all of the arguments for separating from England are based on simple facts, plain thinking, and good old common sense. The colonists would gather in town squares, and the town crier, it was his job, kind of the newscaster of today, a booming voice would read these letters over and over, written by Paine, and as you will find out, the writing was good and passionate and invigorating, and it worked.